sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this honorable chamber was debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We return to the Appropriation Bill 2026.
This Honourable House now returns to Standings Finance Committee. Honourable Member for Christchurch South. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There's a sub-program, Children at Risk, and maybe some of the officers may expect me to ask this question. It is known that the ministry does not have all the resources at its disposal to handle the myriad challenges that children face or children are presenting with in terms of mental or psychological challenges that they face. I ask this question, or I'm asking for an update as the minister responsible for religious affairs to find out from the ministry what is the progress on the outreach that some leaders in the faith-based community or faith community made to the ministry, I would now say many years ago, with respect to assisting the ministry with helping our young people who badly need the assistance. They have volunteered some of their services. I know some initial meetings were held, and I'd like to get an update as to where we are with leaders in the faith community providing their assistance, those who are suitably qualified and vetted, providing their assistance to the ministry responsible, particularly for our primary and secondary schools.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Before I invite the senior psychologist in the ministry, Ms. Juanita Brathwaite-Wharton, to treat to your question, one of the things that continues to be of priority to the ministry is to ensure that we can bring the best skill set, both from within and outside of the ministry, to treat to these issues. A lot of our young people are facing some significant challenges that need that assistance, not just from a technical point of view, but also being mindful of the fact that there's a spiritual component that we can bring to bear to a lot of the challenges that we have. But I also want to go a step further. One of the things that has started with the ministry, the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South, in his previous capacity, he would have held a number of consultations with our ministry on how do we ensure that we look at a number of our young people who face these challenges and now bringing them into bear through the right interventions. So I want to give the floor to our senior psychologist to treat specifically to the intervention that you've asked for.
Sorry. Juanita Brathwaite-Wharton, senior psychologist. Thank you, Honourable Minister, for your question. Let me say that the ministry, the government of Barbados has spent quite a bit of funds investing in student support services over the last 4 years. We now have about 50 odd persons working in that department, additional psychologists, social workers, school counselors, school safety officers. About a 300% increase in the numbers of persons who work with support services in schools. The school counselors work very closely with the guidance counselors at the schools that they are attached to. And the social workers, along with the primary school counselors, work closely with school administrations to ensure that students in need of support services are given the kind of attention that they should get. In terms of working with the faith-based organizations, we continue to work with churches and persons from the faith-based organizations in the provision of support services for our children. Usually schools work very closely with churches in the surrounding districts using a community-based approach to meeting student needs. We also have churches working in terms of presenting themselves at assemblies, working to provide food security for families who are having challenges. We have a number of churches who provide hampers for some of our families that are vulnerable. We also have persons who volunteer their time and go into schools, providing counseling support, but also working with children who are at risk, who may have particular individual needs that are to be met. We also, during the whole school approach, we also continue during morning assemblies, not only to have prayers so that we can set the tone for the day and establish the kinds of values that we want to instill in our students, but many schools utilize an approach where they have different persons coming in, whether it is to talk to the whole school, to your levels, at the classroom level, so that they can get that kind of intervention from those from faith-based organizations who are so poised to assist in what we're doing. So we have been working exceedingly hard to provide the kind of socio-emotional and psychological support that our children need. We recognize that the ministry cannot do it alone. Indeed, it's a whole of nation approach that is needed to assist our students. And so we continue to welcome the assistance of other faith-based personnel who may be willing to work with us and come on board to ensure that our children reach their fullest potentials.
Thank you very much. A follow-up question, Mr. Chair. I've heard the response. The follow-up question has to do with what was shared with us as a ministry maybe 3-4 years ago. And that had to do with the matter of an organized program that included appropriate vetting by the Ministry of Education to make sure that persons who were going to be providing the psychological support were actually qualified to do so, but also suitable to do so. I have not heard anything in the response that speaks to that matter, because it was my understanding and my ministry's understanding that that was the holdup in getting an organized program off the ground. I'd like to find out if that organized program is still being pursued. If it is not, it's just a matter of me going back to the faith-based organizations as a group to say that that is now off the cards and schools are reaching out individually. But I'm asking because of what was shared with us, what was told to us, and I want to find out if that approach is still being considered or pursued.
Thank you. Most definitely, it is still being pursued. We're in the process of working on a paper that will come to Cabinet shortly.
My final follow-up, Mr. Chair, I'm just echoing what the Prime Minister would have said if she heard the word shortly. Shortly is not a time, but I would appreciate if shortly was contextualized, at least, even if there was no date given.
In about 2 weeks, you will have a response.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Chair. A very special good afternoon to the Minister and his team. And you're doing a very wonderful job so far. My question relates to the sub-program 640 to about 661. And the repeated allocations I see under 751 for repairs to the school plan, along with drainage, roofing, hurricane shutters, solar installation, a lot of good work. So as the minister now responsible for infrastructure, my question relates to the standards for secondary schools particularly, but also primary schools, so that these works form part of a structured upgrade and not the continuous issues that we have in the public service, not only in education, with these remedial interventions. And so my question specifically is in relation to what are the standards? Who sets those standards? How do we guarantee that we have a new mind frame in relation to how we look at these facilities? And you spoke, Minister, as well to climate resilience. And my question specifically also relates to the climate resilience issue, because it is not only about being prepared for hurricanes. These days are hotter, some are wetter. We have dust in the atmosphere. So to what extent are we preparing our schools really for these climate issues that we face as part of this climate crisis? And I have one follow-up question.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member, Minister, Senior Minister. What the ministry has been doing, even before I would have started in this portfolio, was to look at the overall view as to what is the ideal school. And out of that came a number of things. One, competitions in terms of designs and what those designs would look like, which then, of course, have informed and continues to inform what our technical team, and by extension contractors when they're doing refurbishments, would do in terms of retrofitting the school. But outside of that, to your broader question on the standards, I'm happy you asked that, because what the ministry is now doing is to now make sure that if you are doing a school in the north or the south, primary or secondary, that there is a settled minimum standard based on industry practice, whether that be in infrastructure, construction, architecture, to be able to ensure that as we roll out the schools, that it meets that requirement. Second of all, with the issue of the fact, as you rightly suggested, we're in a hot country. And whilst, of course, it would be very ambitious for us to have fully air-conditioned schools, that's not practical, at least not in this time of our development. But what we're doing, and I want to use Oceanana, which by extension I think is in your constituency, right on the border, yeah, is a very perfect example of that innovation meeting practical realities for Barbados in terms of pedagogy, but also in terms of climate and the weather. Because in that facility, notwithstanding that it also has infrastructure that is fit for purpose, that can withstand bad weather, hurricanes, but also material that is fireproof in many respects. It also is allowing for a cool atmosphere for students and teachers and those who come into it to be able to engage. And that is the sort of modeling that must now continue. But as you've rightly asked, it can only happen if we have that settled standard as to what the ideal school in Barbados is like. And that's something that the ministry, through our technical team, is rolling out. But I also want to invite the permanent secretary and the head of ETMU to also treat to the question.
Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, sorry. So yes, and Mr. Baker will be able to speak more fully on the standards that they comply with, because they do have to, the contractors, etc., do have to comply with the building standards, yes. But in addition to that, when we would have done when we look at the designs for the schools that we did about 2 years ago, we would have all made sure that we factored in those things to make sure that the classrooms are cool, to make sure in terms of the lighting, so in terms of the design of the schools, took all of these things into consideration, the lighting, making sure that there's adequate spaces and windows for lighting and the air quality, etc. So all of those things were taken into consideration with the designs. But Mr. Baker, he'll be able to speak more fully on those standards that we do have to adhere to and that we do continue to adhere to as we develop our schools and refurbish our schools to make them not only more modern, but also resilient, because that is our key word, making sure that all of our buildings are resilient. Mr. Baker?
Thank you. One of the main things that we've been doing, and this will be evident during the summer program, when we are looking to repair the roofs of the schools, we are now moving away from the normal permaclad sheet to those colored sheets, especially the white ones, that helps to reduce the heat that comes into the spaces. So that's one standard. Once we are replacing the roofs, we have to utilize those sheets that reduce heat. In addition, the number of windows per room, to make sure that we allow for natural ventilation. As the minister said, we are not in a position, we don't have the luxury to provide AC to all of the rooms. So we're looking at the number of windows and the sizes of the windows that, in terms of ventilation. And then it also helps with natural lighting along with the artificial lighting. Outside of that, going forward, and especially at the primary schools, we have developed designs for a standard design for the garbage enclosures for the schools. One of the things we found is that the way that the garbage is disposed now or stored at the school lends to the possibility of rodents and stuff like that getting access. So we've now designed fully enclosed garbage enclosures to ensure that that part does not occur. We are also now rolling out very shortly new bins to be provided to the schools, those similar to what are at the households, where rodents and other animals cannot get in there to interfere with the garbage and to have it strewn across the areas. So that's part of the things that we're doing. We've developed a standard also for the minimum standard for the nutrition room, or what we call the school meals room. We are in the process of also developing other standards for other parts of the school, but those are the ones that we started on, and we endeavor that by the middle of this year we'll have all those standards developed. We are also looking to work with the secondary schools, notwithstanding that they have boards, but to provide them with those standards as well that we want to have at the secondary schools as well.
My follow-up question, Minister, you spoke of, in your response, you spoke of the pedagogy as it relates to climate change. And I think this is, for me, a very important issue. I mean, I used to be Minister of Maritime and Blue Economy. And so my question is, to what extent, Minister, have we incorporated issues related to environmental sustainability, climate change education generally, and resilience as part of our pedagogy? Because it is okay to build these climate resilient schools. We need to build climate knowledgeable and resilient people and students. And so to what extent have you been able to incorporate this knowledge and these competencies into our student class so they're ready for to be part of a climate resilient Barbados?
Yeah, thank you, Minister. So you're right. It's more than just the infrastructure. And of course, I want to use the opportunity to share with the country, not just the Oceanana Innovation Hub, focusing on the sustainability with respect to ocean, but also that the ministry and by extension government is also working on the Barbados Climate School in Charleston, so as to ensure not just that the infrastructure is there in your constituency, but as you rightly said, the curriculum. But in addition to that, we've already started throughout our teaching at the secondary level, and to a lesser extent, primary, to help our students understand the importance of climate sustainability, and how do we build out a future of the country understanding the tenets of resilience. And what we've done is through the curriculum is to break down, for example, resilience in helping them to understand it in its most basic of forms, not just in climate, but in life. But of course, it's a transferable concept. And what it has done so far, and the team has advised me, is that it has now allowed for children to now starting to connect the dots. You would have heard the chief this morning, for example, speaking on numeracy. And for a long time, when you were at school, when I was at school, math was a very, very abstract concept. You learn the principles of math, but not its practicability to life. But what we're now doing is to ensure that all the different concepts that our children are now learning is that they can now transfer that into other areas of life. Because why? Our ultimate goal is to prepare a solution-oriented student that can go anywhere in the world and to come up with concepts that provide global solutions to global problems. So when you look therefore at the integration, it is already there, but we have to step it up in earnest because the future of this country really requires us to get this generation of young Bajans to be resilient, yes, but the application of that resilience. But I also want to invite Shea Branch, who is the head, of course, of the Oceanana Innovation Hub, Greenwich, to be able to speak to that, our director. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Minister, and good afternoon to all the honourable members here. Shea Greenwich, the CHE, for the record, Director of the Oceanana Innovation Hub. If I could just circle back to your first question, Senior Minister, about some of the standards, I do want to share with the public that Oceanana is currently exploring the EDGE certification with the World Bank. At the moment, this is a green building standard that will be certifying a resource efficient, low carbon and net zero buildings, and Oceanana has been built and designed with all that in mind. So I hope that treats to that standardization that you're looking for. And just to follow on from Minister in terms of what we're actually teaching and doing at the Oceanana Innovation Hub, since we would have launched in July 2025, 8 months ago, we have been developing programming that treats very specifically to climate resilience, ocean literacy. We started off with our summer program, which was a really big hit for the students, and we have made this investment for the students. This was a summer program free of cost to the public, and we welcomed 61 children to the hub. This is from ages 8 to 13, as well as 14 to 17. The learning currents that we have that the students focus on, currents are our modules, that's the name we give them. We have 6 currents. We focus on climate change, marine conservation and biodiversity, marine pollution, blue economy and innovation, disaster management and coastal resilience, as well as law of the sea and advocacy. We've been able to engage with lots of different third sector organizations and community partners to help to bring that real world application into the classroom setting. So one of the things that I can say very boldly, our students, after coming through our summer program, they did make very specific comments about the fact, I'm thinking of Dylan in particular from Alexandra, about how being at Oceanana, having that very practical approach actually solidified all of the learnings that he had in Module 2 of environmental science. And so we went and we took the data insights from summer and we used that data to then inform how we develop the wider blue curriculum in itself. And we had an honourable member mention earlier, asked the question really about the historical grounding in the modern curriculum. We want to make sure that this curriculum definitely is focused on the type of citizen that we're producing, the type of student that comes out of Oceanana. And so we had a lot of our project-based learning in action, whereby fisher folk, for example, came into the Oceanana classroom, taught our students how to make a fishing line. Then we took them onto the fishing boat, and then we took them to the fish market, and from there they had to make their own lunch with some grade A tuna, just so that they could understand the whole process and appreciate the value chain and all of the different steps. When you see a fish in the supermarket, what's been involved there. And just touching again on that historical approach, we had the fishermen come into Oceanana and actually teach our students how to make fish pots, knowing that this is a dying art. And a lot of people don't even know what a fish pot looks like, but we had our students make a fish pot with the fisher folk directly to have that intergenerational conversation and interaction as well. And so not just to make it for knowing the cultural heritage of a fish pot, but also, for example, so that they can understand what are the actual harms of a fish pot to the marine ecosystem.
Minister, permit me one follow-up question. I mean, clearly this is brilliant work. And so my question is in relation to the wider teaching class, the teachers. To what extent have we, because this is the school right outside my constituency and hopefully the one in Charleston, but to what extent have we been able, Minister, to prepare our teachers to be able to teach this? I think at the primary school level, at the secondary level, I mean, we've asked about teacher training and development generally, but specifically this climate change issue, a former member didn't like the word resilience, but this climate change issue is probably going to be one of the most serious issues, the climate crisis really issue facing Barbados. And so to what extent have we been able to incorporate this gently and generally in our English and in our math and in our PE? To the point where it becomes part of how we see Barbados, because my view is that it simply cannot be a course of study, but it has to be a way of life. And I'm just wondering generally, beyond the brilliant work that's being done by Ms. Greenwich here, generally how have we prepared our teachers and our schools and our general workers and everybody to be part of this movement in the ministry?
Thank you, Senior Minister. The simple answer is this. There's been a very deliberate engagement, particularly with the teachers on this front. But of course, we have to go wider, as you rightly mentioned, including all of our staff, invariably a whole of education approach, if we're to get this part right. But what has been successful so far is that integration of teachers, and the chief just reminded me that there's constant review of how do we ensure that this is incorporated in their training as early as Eardiston, because even before they come into teaching proper, they must now grasp these concepts. But what we've done further, and you've alluded to it, you would recall in the 80s, 90s, when the country rallied around tourism is our business, let's play our part. And if we're to get it right, as you said, the country must now learn it at its most basic tenet from early. So in all the assessments coming up from early childhood education, primary school, secondary school, all of the different exposure of learning must now reflect resilience and sustainability. How do you grow an economy whilst at the same time not doing so to detriment of future generations? And I believe that the time is now that we should go across the country, and even in your ministry though, where even in transport, there's nothing stopping us with buses having those little ads running when people are in the bus sitting down, seeing things that will help them to reorient this new mantra, because the future depends on it, as you said, and it can't just be education alone. So my ministry, your ministry, private sector, NGOs, churches, focusing on the future of Barbados through the lens of resilience. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair, that's it. Thanks for the response, Minister.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister, I have two questions. Before I start, I was really shocked when the Honourable Member for St. Michael North West is still having problems with rats. My two questions to you. The school nutrition policy, can you share some information about the monitoring process and the success of that particular initiative to date? And this is really in looking for me at the primary school setting, and I will come with a follow-up question to that.
Yep, thank you, Minister. So with respect to the policy, of course, it's already in motion. But the monitoring, what we've done in the ministry is to now have, for example, a dedicated officer, education officer, who focuses on this area. One, in terms of the rollout of the policy, but two, how our schools, and down to its most basic component, for example, our canteen operators at the secondary level, concessionaires in and around schools. Because why? If we have a policy and for it to work, we have to ensure that on a day-to-day basis, we can see what is happening. But in addition, it is more than just the policy itself from that point of view. Education, as you know, in terms of physical education, if we're to see some of the successes we want in the policy, our relationship with physical education is key. So yes, nutrition is a part of it, but physical education is another component. And therefore, what we've been doing is to also ensure that our teachers around the country who are in physical education, but also schools becoming a place of wellness and activity and getting our children to understand the importance of movement will help us to further advance this. But I'd also invite the team from the Chief's team to treat to it.
Thank you, Minister. As you may be aware, the school nutrition policy was approved in Cabinet in May 2022, and we began the implementation in 2023. And as Minister Chad Blackman just said, we have an officer within the Ministry of Educational Transformation who is dedicating her time to monitoring what is happening within the schools. Well, she doesn't stand alone because we have an implementation committee. We work in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the National Nutrition Center, the Heart and Stroke Foundation. They also give us support. But I can tell you that as of today, about 85% of our schools, this is 85% of our 105 public schools, are in full compliance with the removal of added sugar beverages. I can also tell you that with regard to water, our children are drinking a lot more water. That culture change is happening. And I have here a figure in front of me. It's saying that we have recorded over 4.2 million bottles filled. Children are drinking lots of water. And this represents for us a behavioral change, and we are happy to see this. Additionally, since the implementation of the policy, we have been conducting vendor training as well as canteen concessionaire training, vendor training. Yes, as well as canteen concessionaire training. Initially, when the canteen concessionaires and vendors started, they were a little bit hesitant with regard to the alternative options, but having gone through some training with the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, as well as training through the Ministry of Educational Transformation, several of them are a lot more comfortable offering alternative snacks and beverages. We continue to work with the Heart and Stroke Foundation to do the school nutrition tours. And as our minister said just now, for us, it isn't only about ensuring that children eat healthily, we want them to be active as well. And as a result, over the past few years, we have had healthy youth through physical education, which is a day dedicated to teachers and students and other members of staff moving. So they will, they will do their skipping, they will do jumping jacks, they will go and do aerobics on the field, but it's about having, making sure that our students are active and that they're healthy. Now we have 14 major initiatives planned under the umbrella of the school nutrition policy for this academic year. The first one that I will speak about is the BSAC partnership that we have, and we want to be able to give a prize to the most active young people in BSAC, right? Those who subscribe to a healthy lifestyle, so we're very excited about that. We've also had several sessions for this year where teachers are engaged in activities as well, like aerobics, dance exercise, etc. And for us, it is important that teachers get on board because several of our children look up to teachers. So when they see teachers doing certain activities, they want to do them as well. So we have coming up Women's Day School Engagement Walk. We have planned a Barbados School Nutrition Policy social media platform launch. We're going to do some more vendor training in addition to reviewing the alternative snack list. Now, the snack list used to be reviewed twice a year, but this time we're going to review it and have it published by the ending of April so that the vendors are able to prepare for the coming academic year. So all of these things are what we are doing as part of implementation of the Barbados School Nutrition Policy. And of course, we want the parents of the children to assist us in ensuring that that statistic of 1 in every 3 children is obese is reduced, because we don't want any obese children here in Barbados. We have a small island. Our children can swim, they can play football, they can exercise, they can eat healthily as well. And I would like the parents and members of the public to assist us in that regard as well.
Sorry, just a follow-up question. You mentioned vendor training. Is this those who are operating outside of the school compound or those on the inside?
The vendor training is for those persons who are operating outside and inside.
Okay. My other question, Chair, is related to the PE teachers in the primary school setting. I am being impacted in sports because when my coaches go to the schools, I still have some issues with head teachers and teachers not releasing students to be involved in the process. So my question is, what is being done to ensure that we have qualified PE teachers in the schools and not teachers who are interested in sports being involved in the process? Because if I'm to broaden the pyramid by having the schools involved in sports, then I think we need qualified PE teachers involved in the process. My ministry would have recently done some research, and of all the primary schools on the island, West Terrace actually have the most students involved in sports. And I believe the academics are matching or equal to what they're having in the field of sports as it relates to success. So in short, what are the plans as it relates to having qualified PE teachers within the primary school setting? Chair, I yield back.
Jude.
Right, with regard to PE teachers, I can say that over the past 3 years, we've been having training workshops with teachers of physical education by our officer who is assigned to physical education. That is to make sure that they are skilled enough to deliver physical education. Now, very often when people think about physical education, they think sports, but our children need to develop physical literacy as well. And that is one of the things that we have been pushing, getting our students to be able to, coordinate, etc. Related to the question about getting more teachers in the area of PE and upskilling those PE teachers even more, we have explored linkages with the Barbados Olympic Association with regard to training, and we have been in talks relative to how we can upskill these PE teachers further. I know that we'll be having a lot more discussions with them to see how that will happen. But I must say that with regard to physical education, we are doing our utmost best at the moment to explore every avenue to make sure that our teachers are skilled enough to deliver. There's one more thing I want to say here with regard to physical education, but the thought just left me. All right, so with regard to the head teachers, the minister just reminded me, thanks. With regard to the head teachers not complying, I remember that was an issue about 3 years ago, but we were able to resolve that problem by having meetings with the National Sports Council. They will come to us and we will have discussions about the schools in which they will be going, and we will, as a ministry, pave the way. So I will say that it will be good to have meetings, again, to see exactly where the bottlenecks are, because wherever the bottlenecks are, we as a ministry, we will seek to remove them, because our students are depending on these programs to be fit and to be healthy. So we're willing to work with the National Sports Council to make these programs become a reality.
Sorry, final comment. You mentioned the BOA. I used to know the Minister of Youth, and there's a strong program coming out of BCC, where there's a sports program there. So maybe you should look to the youngsters who are coming out of that program at BCC to get them involved, who will be coming fit for purpose, as opposed to trying to, let me say, retrofit teachers by going through BOA. Are you back?
Well, thank you for that suggestion.
Let me also add, Honourable Member, to what the Chief would have mentioned. Earlier today, in my presentation, I would have spoken to what we're rolling out in the ministry, known as Partners in Education. And of course, yes, we're sister ministries, all part of one government. But the reason why this is so key, because the different components of education and then different components of education transformation, including physical education and sport, that now requires us to have a different relationship in the 21st century Barbados, looking ahead, because why? Yes, we want to have healthy students who go on to be healthy adults. But two, how do we ensure that our sport programs, whether it's in cricket, in badminton, swimming, whatever, that they have the necessary pride of place within not just the curriculum, but within the culture of schools. And once we get that shift in mindset with respect to culture, of the importance of sport, for example, it therefore can't be left to one school or one principal giving pride of place, whereas another may not be inclined to do so. Because it's part and parcel of ensuring that our children are healthy, and that two, they have the best exposure for sport and sport development going forward. So it's a timely question that you've posed, and as the Chief would have indicated, a good time for us, similar to what we do already with the Ministry of Health on so many other fronts of educational development. I think the time has come for us to do a similar vein with the Ministry of Sport and so many others in pursuit of all the different objectives under the umbrella of transformation in education.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thanks, Chair. I have two questions, and I want you to permit me, through the Minister, to operate forward in reverse. Before I go forward into my new ministry, I want to reverse into the ministry where I led for the last 6 years. And I want you to appreciate the fact that, although you are modest, I want you to be able to tell Barbadians about your project, which me and yourself and your officers and my officers work closely, assiduously together to ensure that the humors of our children, body, soul, and mind, work collaboratively to build out a student and a young person who could achieve their goals in a wholesome way. I want you to expose to the rest of the country, since it's not supposed to be a secret between your ministry and my ministry, the school beautification project, which we would have spent many months working hard to ensure that the concept of beautification become the new norm in Barbados. My former ministry. I'm reminded by my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right with respect to the school beautification program. For the benefit, of course, of not just Parliament, but the country, both ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Education Transformation, continue to ensure that our schools are beautified. And what does that look like in practical terms? Both ministries have set out what the ideal school should look like, particularly in terms of landscaping. You've heard the Prime Minister and other members of government continue to speak on the fact that school is more than academics, school is more than brick and mortar, and that our students and teachers, when they go there, and those who come into contact with the school, must be able to also enjoy it as a place of peace and tranquility. And let's face it, we all eat with our eyes. And when you walk into a place that looks welcoming, It therefore sets the right tone for learning, for tuition, for teachers to enjoy teaching, for persons to do business at the school. But equally, there's a third limb of happiness and pride of place, the communities in which the schools are in. And what we've seen through that initiative also is to ensure that persons in the community also take ownership in helping to beautify our country's schools. And therefore, you would have seen in, I think it was either October or November, that this year, the ministry is now rolling out a competition that will have a number of categories, but ultimately, the best kept school in Barbados through the lens of landscaping. And this is so important for many levels, but the main one is about ensuring that we can create, as you said, the mind, body, and soul, so that all those coming to school, teachers, students alike, can feel that sense of pride in the ownership. But in addition to those who are, quote unquote, paid in government to do these things, once a community and community groups can have ownership, and churches, faith-based organizations in beautifying a school in their community, you then also have another benefit. There's less likelihood of vandalism, because white people have a stake in something. And once you have a stake in something, you take care of it. And as you said, it is something that we need to, and we certainly will let the country know more about it, because we have to get it right. But one of the things that we've been doing is on the outside, particularly in terms of our fences around the schools, is that we're placing bougainvillea on the outside, and then pittosporum or any other type of plant in its class, so as to ensure that the children, as they play, don't have to get into plants that would obviously prick them, but protecting on the outside. So from a physical point of view, the country will see over the coming months, particularly in our 60th year, schools that look like places that you would want to go and learn and enjoy. But it is more than just planting of trees. Beautifying the school also has to go hand in hand before refurbishment as well. Because when you go into the plant, even on the inside, not just on the outside, the beautification also requires plants on the corridors and different things, and the aesthetics of the school. So that the entire plant, imagine a resort, but some place that you're going to learn. That is really what we're trying to achieve here, so that everyone coming into the school can be comfortable.
And of course, those small landscapers within the communities will be able to help build out, whether it's altruism or whether they come into contracts with government, because it's all part of our give back mentality. And the second question is that I will go forward into the new mandate. I know that you would have exposed earlier, your team, the policy as it relates to persons who are challenged, children who are challenged, who have certain dyscrasias, of course. I'm speaking primarily about those who are in the disabled community, persons with disabilities, and you would have insisted that the curriculum must now be fit for purpose for all individuals. And you would also have said earlier, the question by the MP for St. Michael South, that it is all in your effort to ensure that there is decent work access for all based on training. I want to laud you for that, but equally I want to ask, because I would have met it as my first order of business, and thanks to my predecessor, the Minister for St. Michael himself, who would have laid the platform and initiated all these great things. But I want to say that, and ask if there is a look at the plant itself to make sure that they are accessible for persons who are having difficult challenges. I know the chief would have spoken about the visual acuity and the tests that you all were doing to ensure that persons are able to see the board and what's not. But is there any plan to make these facilities accessible and easily accessible for persons with disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll ask, of course, our technical management team to treat to that in terms of the infrastructure building. But what is necessary is to further ensure, because I know there's legislation which speaks to the buildings, certainly in the country, with respect to the disabled. But what we have to now ensure that as we refurbish, as we build and new builds, is that all of our plants continue to have that refurbishment of inclusivity. So whether it's a ramp, but even beyond the ramp, how do we ensure that persons who may, for example, have challenges with visibility, that all of the equipment and desk and everything necessary are fit for purpose for them, the adequate bathroom and bathroom spaces and height sizes of sinks. So a very granular focused way of ensuring that the entire school plant is now fit for purpose through the lens of inclusivity. So that is something that the ministry is working to deliver. But I just invite Mr. Baker very briefly to treat to that, to share how we are now rolling that out through refurbishments and upgrading of our plants. Very briefly.
Thank you, Minister. Under the Skills for the Future project, those schools, the 10 schools that are to be upgraded during the coming summer, those are the first 10 schools that will get the new standards in terms of disabled access throughout the school compound. Following that, those schools going on from that, and others undertaken by on the ETMU will follow those same guidelines as well. But 10 schools for sure by the end of this year will be at that required standard, and we will be moving forward from there.
Yes, just me implore you, and I know that the guidance will come from your minister, but there is an axiom that is preached by all members in the disabled community that nothing for us without us. And I would implore you to, and encourage you to have the conversation with the council so that they will have an input as to what they will want within the confines of the school. Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right, but rest assured that we've had continued dialogue, and we will continue to have, because one of the things that we are very aware of is that as we pursue policy and government policy and roll out of that policy, it can't just be that you've consulted before and that's it. It's continued dialogue, and that's why, as I said, partnership in education is so critical to the objective of what we're trying to achieve here, because even as you deliver, there will be times when things might need to be modified. It is like any new project. There may be teething problems, for example, and the stakeholders must be able to come and share and say, well, this has worked, this is not working, and these are the areas in which perhaps you may want to consider or reconsider. So I wholeheartedly welcome that point.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, one of the concerns that people have is what I would call the underutilization of the school plants. The schools shut up generally right after school, which is 3:30, unless there's something like brownies or cubs or something else going on. And there are so many community-based activities that are looking for a home or some accommodation to allow them to do it. I don't know what plans you have to make the schools accessible for use after hours that would ease some of the pressure and encourage evening activities like dancing or after-school classes or other community, like table tennis, some other things to utilize the school, because it makes no sense to shut down the plant. The plant is not suffering any significant wear and tear being used other than for educational purposes, and it would take some pressure off those areas that may have schools but don't necessarily have resource centers. So that's part one.
All right, thank you, Attorney General. Before I invite the Chief, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Our schools must be places in which the communities can benefit in terms of use. You've highlighted a number of them, but I think what has to happen is also to, let me backtrack. I understand part of what has stopped it in many respects. And what do I mean? Throughout the years, of course, schools have been used by communities and continue to do so. But like in any other thing else, there are pockets of persons who come into the schools, notwithstanding the investment we're making and refurbishments, and vandalize the schools. And too far east is west, and we can't stop people from using these schools because of a few bad apples. So I think one of the things that the ministry will be doing is to walking the country through why is it important for them to have access to these schools, but equally to whom much is given, much is expected, so that there's that consciousness, similar to what the Honourable Member for St. Michael South would have indicated through the consciousness of resilience. There now has to be a consciousness of responsibility. But in addition to that, we must now just settle on how do we ensure that across the board and in communities, particularly in communities where there may not be another facility, an alternative facility for persons to go and do the things that you've outlined, must now be able to have access to those schools, bearing in mind these are the criteria that you must follow. When you come into the school, you clean up after, etc., etc. So that's the type of thing that I fully support, and that we must now move in earnest. If we're also to try to have spaces that would allow for young people, and of course other generations as well, other age groups, sorry, but particularly for young people who otherwise may find themselves doing other things that we may not want as a society. They must have safe spaces to be able to build out what we want the country to treat to. But I'd invite the Chief to also respond.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the question, Attorney General. I must say that you're absolutely correct in terms of speaking about the underutilization of our school plans. You know, usually you have school between 9 and 3, you might have some extracurricular activities, and then the school is closed for the rest of the evening. And that is the reason that we are embarking on having service clubs within the schools. This is why we're talking about the beautification project, where you can have the community involved in planting the plants and the boys on the block coming and, you know, doing some work on the school and so on, because we want the school to be seen as part of the community. Because in keeping with the question that was asked by the Honourable Dr. Ramel Springer, and you know, and from St. Andrew, right? He was talking about making things Bajan, and Bajan is all about community, so we want to really bring that back. What I will say here as well is that there needs to be an even greater partnership with other ministries, because in order for the schools to be used, we need to have programs. And the Ministry of Education will not carry all of the programs. So there needs to be partnership with other ministries, for example, the Ministry of Sports, the ministry that deals with youth, the Ministry of Technological and Vocational Training, so that we can make these school plans available for community programs, bringing the community back into the school. Yeah, so I fully support it, and I know Minister is fully supportive of it as well, and we welcome discussion with other ministries to see how we can make this a reality.
Following on from that, one of the impediments to using school is this constant requirement for additional insurance. If you want to use a school for a branch meeting, for example, I'm calling that one because it's the easy one, you have to ensure you cover the insurance to use the school. If the school is not being used in a manner inconsistent with the type of building that it is, surely under your normal occupiers liability insurance, contemplated activities must be covered. Every time we attach the $150 or whatever it is to use the school afterwards for a small club, right? Let's say somebody wants to do dancing, ballroom dancing in the school hall, right? Why should they have to pay? Quite frankly, ballroom dancing is probably less destructive to school hall than children running about at lunchtime, right? So we need to look at that. This was raised last year, it was raised the year before, and we keep having this undertaking to look at it, but I am sure that your insurance, if it does not now contemplate additional uses for the school, can easily be adjusted to reflect that with minimal, if any, increase in the premiums. But that proves a sticking point, what I call an unnecessary sticking point for a lot of persons or groups that want to use the school. $150 might not seem like a lot to you sitting there. But if you are a small group trying to get started and you paid $150 every week for a month, that's $600, right? So I think that a decision needs to be firmly taken in relation to that, and it needs to be explored. Let us not come back this time next year and have that one is one of the low hanging fruit. That one is just too easy to resolve.
Thank you, Honourable Member AG. I'm heartened that the suggestion comes from the government's chief legal advisor. So the ministry certainly will, when we go back, speak to it, and certainly we'll be coming to you for some comments and guidance as to how can we treat to this.
My last question is, I have noticed that schools, and particularly primary schools, focus on the educational plan, right? The stuff that's relating to classroom learning. But in a lot of instances, the playing fields attached to primary schools tend to have not been well upkept. Like if you go to, sorry to use this example, Commonwealth, the Commonwealth playing field, top class. It can host any sporting activity on it, right? Some of the other Harrison College, the ones that have their own groundsmen, the secondary schools have top class playing fields, but you go to a school like St. Christopher, where, quite frankly, I wonder how the children play football, but you will never learn to slide tackle. If you go and slide tackle, anybody come up, cut up, right, with the rock sticking out. St. Bartholomew actually has no playing field. So if we're looking at trying to, all the budding athletes and the budding sports people we have in Barbados started really young. Oba was a talent at 7 years old. If we do not put conducive environments to capture and encourage them at 7 years old to 11 years old, which is the primary school age, if we don't put the facilities there, then those children, if even they develop an aptitude, are starting off behind the ball. So I want to know, what are y'all looking at? What is the ministry looking at in terms of developing the sporting infrastructure at primary schools? Primary schools, the sports programs seem to be an adjunct to the main educational focus, as opposed to seeing sports as a formal and critical part of education and the curriculum itself. So I use the two schools in my constituency because I'm painfully, actually, there was a football match at Bay Primary School, and the people almost protested. I know, because one of my football teams was playing there, and there was a rock. I brought it to the attention of the Minister for St. Michael's South. There was a rock, a large rock in the middle of the playing field, sticking out through the surface. So I think we need to seriously, this is one of those things that would take an easy investment up front and be capable of easy maintenance afterwards. And I think it's something that is critical if we're trying to encourage, or we're talking about the obese kids and whatnot. It's not just a national school nutritional program. It got to be facilitating sporting and extracurricular development. All right, to put as a question, what plans do you have?
Thank you, AG. So with respect to what we're doing, I want to take a step back, because you made the comparison, rightfully so, between secondary schools and primary and the standards. As you know, secondary schools are run on a day-to-day basis by the boards, which allows them to do a lot of things at pace and at scale. Whereas at the primary level, the primary schools are, yes, run by the principal, but the ministry still has that large day-to-day oversight, as it were. And one of the things that will be coming to cabinet shortly is the new proposed governance structure for our primary schools. So, of course, instead of one school having, a primary school having a board, as it were, we're looking at a cluster, maybe, let's say 3 schools to a board. What that does is to be able to now let that board go into the school and to do all the different things that the secondary level is doing, including facilities. But in addition to that, the partnership which already exists with the Sports Council in terms of the playing fields, the maintenance, and the regrading. A lot of our fields need regrading. So whether you're talking cricket for cricket activities or football, what now needs to happen in earnest is really that rollout, because it happens, but it's not happening at scale, and it's not happening in a timely fashion that allows for some of the challenges that both you and the Honourable Member for St. Michael South were alluding to just now. So that's something that we're doing in earnest, but I also want to very briefly invite both our Deputy Education Officer, Reverend Scott, and once again, our Head of ETMU to treat to the issue of the curriculum side of sport and its importance in the curriculum. And of course, how do we ensure that our facilities generally, including the playing fields, are given pride of place?
Thank you, Mr. Minister. In terms of the preparing for sports, our officer who's responsible for physical education has responsibility for engaging with the schools, both at the primary and the secondary level, in terms of ensuring that our students are involved in physical education and sports, and any training that is needed, he's responsible for engaging in that with them. He's also partnering with the Earthston Teachers Training College to ensure that those teachers are prepared, as well as engaging with the National Sports Council in terms of the field. Pardon? Oh, Stephen Scott, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, acting with responsibility for planning and development. Sorry. So those are the general areas. Of course, he also works with the NAPSAC and the BSAC committees as they prepare for the athletics as well as other sports, because BSAC has now taken on other sports under its tenure as well. And he oversees that, and therefore, in terms of the fields, again, reaching out to the National Sports Council to engage with the fields, both at the primary and the secondary level.
I thank you for the comments that you all have made, but I am no more confident than when I started, right? Just to say we need to attach a level of seriousness to it, and we need to do it quickly, because as I said, we keep talking about childhood obesity, we keep trying to get children involved in constructive pursuits, but yet at the critical age where children need to play and run about, the facilities attached to schools where they would naturally transition after school while waiting for the mother or father to pick them up, or while waiting for things to ease off, those facilities just don't exist, and just don't exist in a sufficient quality to encourage that development that we need. So I think that is something that if it is not a front burner issue, it should be, because it solves a lot of problems and is just too easy to fix. Thank you.
Agreed, 100% agreed.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, my question relates to the current portfolio that I now hold, which is agriculture and food security. The ministry, again, thanks to the former minister, has built out a number of greenhouses in several schools. And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if I'm able to call out those schools, because I think it is important. The Lodge School, Princess Margaret Secondary School, Derek Smith School and Vocational Center, St. James Primary School, Gordon Walters Primary School, the Alene School, St. Matthew's Primary School, Darrell Jordan Secondary School, Frederick Smith Secondary School, Spring Memorial Secondary School, the Ellerslie School, and then there are at least 3 remaining. So we'd have Grantley Adams Memorial, Trojan Parish Secondary School, and the Seventh-day Adventist Secondary School. So that's a significant investment there. Responding to the national call for young people to be involved more in agriculture. But what the officials within the ministry are saying to me, even as we've built up the school and had some initial conversations, now that we are at that stage for a rollout, that they're not finding the level of interest in teachers to work with the program. And it seems that there are therefore a dearth of teachers across the system, either who have training that then can help to facilitate the program, or perhaps interests. And I wanted to just kind of find out what is happening at that level. I mean, is that a real scenario in which we do not have the level of teachers that are trained in agriculture that then can then facilitate a program like this, which is, I think we would all agree, extremely important?
Okay, thank you very much, Honourable Member, Minister. Now, with respect to agriculture, let me say firstly that agriculture will be added, as the Chief has advised me, as part of the mainstream curriculum, even more intense than it currently stands. That's one. But two, the issue that we have to confront so as to ensure that at the teaching level, as you rightly indicated, the relationship in which the country has and how it sees agriculture. And why do I start there? The uptake, whether in terms of students and teachers, has to do with how people perceive it. And we're not getting, so you're right, that assessment coming from your colleagues is right. We're not getting the numbers that you would ordinarily want to find with teachers having the skill set necessary or interest. It's there, but not in the numbers that we need. But when you look, certainly in your travels, Minister, and when you look around the world, Barbados must ensure that food security, nutrition, and ensuring that we can provide food for our people, particularly within the context, as we've heard earlier, time and time today again, of resilience. We must ensure that we now understand the role that agriculture has to play. And the historical perspective with respect to seeing agriculture as a second or third tier sector, which completely is opposite. When you look at the North Atlantic, for example, when you look at Europe, in education and as a sector alone, those economies are largely driven by the agricultural industries. And if we are to prepare our schools and school children and population for the future, we must now ensure that we give agriculture its pride of place. Thus, therefore, we have to do some innovative things to excite the imagination of students, to excite the imagination of teachers, so that even at the level of Erdeston, the level of continuing professional development, because we have a lot of teachers in the system who may not have been exposed to agriculture, but through continued professional development, I believe strongly that there should be courses that can also invite them to learn how to be exposed to the industry, exposed to the sector, thus helping our students now to move beyond what it currently stands. But further, a good component, and here's again an opportunity for partnership, or further partnership, because I also want to commend the Honourable Member for St. Philip South for what would have started under his tenure, is that the two ministries must now work hand in hand in addition to the greenhouses and the new techniques in agriculture and how do you move from open field agriculture into technological agriculture, is to include in that curriculum what are the opportunities for investment of our students in agriculture, both as students and even beyond school, so that they know that there's a clear roadmap of once you're involved in agriculture, here's an opportunity for you to tap into. So whether that be a Suriname, whether that be a Guyana, or wherever the opportunities come. And there's a component of the curriculum transformation that we're going to include focusing on leveraging Barbados. We have the strongest currency within the single market and economy. Our logistics, or our location as a logistics hub helps us with many things. So when you tie all of that together, anchored by the fact that we have to now be resilient and food secure, our students must now be given what are the real options in agriculture. But of course, we're in education, and I believe therefore that your ministry, we must now work together to ensure that this can happen. Of course, you have the Hope Agricultural Institute, which will train our teachers, and therefore tying together all the moving components to have a clear direction in terms of education and agricultural development.
Minister, thank you for your response. I think two things arise out of that for me. If I go to the Honourable Member for St. Peter, when you tell me it will be integrated at some point in time in the future, if I can just have just an indication of what that looks like in the timeline, right?
Is that we're in the middle right now of the transformation of the curriculum. So one of the things I want to give you the assurance of as minister, but also the country, that once we get through this process of estimates, the intention is therefore that by September this year, this upcoming academic year, that all of these things therefore will be incorporated so that students will be able to benefit from them coming from September. All right, so rest assured.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you again. The broader question then is, and I know that we have the education transformation agenda, and I hear you saying a number of things that are going to come on stream, but I'm still searching for how are we going to make sure that the education system is continually it's a match between the national imperatives, because you yourself have said about the importance of food security and how critical it is within the context. So how are we going to make sure that we have an education system that continually responds to that imperative? We hear about it at university, but university is not putting out students who are able to take the jobs or be ready for the jobs for the market. Are we doing that also as well at the primary and secondary level, that we don't have an education system that will be able then to tackle those issues, right? And then that question is a large one, Minister, because it also speaks to how are you forward planning and how is the ministry assessing the new trends in terms of where the economy is going and where the society is going, and then to be able to have a somewhat kind of flexible modality for change.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. So first of all, we have the change management unit within the ministry, which manages the change of transformation that we're pursuing. Of course, looking at the broad areas, but in particular, what it also does is that all of the components and the divisions within the ministry, that unit monitors the changes that we've been talking about, so as to ensure that we can have these things rolled out and monitored and evaluated. So a number of things we've outlined to the country. Of course, goal 1 would have been to enhance student performance. Goal 2, strengthening teacher instruction and leadership. And of course, under these headings, there are a number of different deliverables. 3, looking at the improvement of physical infrastructure. 4thly, improving ministry institutional capacity. And 5th, and finally, the regulatory framework, which of course includes a new education act. But I want to go further. You touched on something, Minister, Honourable Member, very, very clear. Historically, there has been, in many respects, a match, but largely a mismatch with respect to our overall ambitions as a country. What does the country need, and how is that education system preparing our student to be able to match that reality? And I want to draw on the example of the United Arab Emirates. They have a standing framework and committee where the Ministry of Education and the ministries that make up the productive sectors, but ultimately the overall national vision, they meet quarterly, and the Ministry of Labour, they meet quarterly, so as to ensure how are we making these targets for the country for the next 10, 20 years. But part of that framework, Minister, is that the curriculum prepares the student for that outcome. So in other words, if we determine, let's say for example, as we've determined, that by 2030, with respect to our energy commitments and transition, perhaps let me use a much further date. Let's say by 2045, we decide that we have to do X, Y, Z as a country. It therefore means that today, the planners in education, backed by the necessary research, must now have from early childhood education straight up to exit at secondary level to be able to now have the skill sets and the tools and the values to be able to future-proof that economy and development that we're talking about. And it therefore means that the ministry must work hand in hand with other ministries like yours, like health, like sport, to ensure that we can look at the national objective in terms of where we're going. And it therefore means that more conversations, but in a very structured and deliberate way, must now happen between ministries. And again, that's why we've made it very clear that the future of the ministry has to be partners in education. Because the one sector that will cross-cut everything and prepare us for that future is the ministry. And therefore, it reiterates the point that education transformation is not a destination, because what is relevant today and the skills that we're preparing our students to have now and for the next 10 years, I am almost certain will look completely different 10 years from now. But equally, the ministry, in whatever configuration it has, must now be able to adapt to that new reality and to be able to meet those targets. So when you look at Mission Barbados, of course, and the and the different missions that we have, the education system, through the curriculum, through the training of our teachers, must be able to be so responsive that it is always looking ahead, whilst at the same time delivering education on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really heartened that you would have asked that question, because it therefore forces us as a ministry, to constantly not just meet amongst ourselves and our usual and regular stakeholders like the unions and teachers and parents, etc., but also looking at the wider governance structure of the country and sectors and industry, so as to be able to prepare us for the future. So therefore, meeting also with the private sector. What are the private sector needs that we have in Barbados, and how are our people and young people coming through the system to be able to meet those demands? And as you rightly said, they would tell you, it is not just about having a degree, but what are the core competencies that the Barbadian child, or adult rather, should have by the time they enter the workforce. So these are the types of conversations that are necessary. And yes, and I'm being reminded about point number 6 that I made this morning: accountability. So that oversight structure is going to be absolutely imperative if we're going to make the gains, just as the UAE has done, just as South Korea has done, using the same model that you would have been probing to get to.
Mr. Speaker, just one final follow-up question, please, if you would allow. Encourage as well the ministry to not think, and in this case, of course, I've been talking about agriculture, food security, in a siloed approach. For me, agriculture is also linked to the culinary arts. Yeah, agriculture should also as well be linked to technology and digital transformation, right? So how that partnership is really deep enough that then we can leverage those cross-cutting areas so that students see, at least like I said, my interest in agriculture, but see that thread of, again, food security into the food that they eat, not only if we can get them to grow it, but also what they eat. And then also as well, like I said, that technology aspects of the kind of new ways that we are propelling agriculture, so that we come out of that mode that we do agricultural studies as a curriculum subject, and it is particularly separate from everything else. But I think for this imperative, that we need to be able to just make sure that those threads are woven right through. I mean, we can talk about maths, right? And the examples there in agriculture, I'm certainly learning about all the maths and the science associated with it. So how do we just make sure that we weave it through the entire kind of curriculum and learning experience as well? Thank you.
So one of the things that we're doing is moving from the traditional exam, chalk and talk exam format of learning into, of course, project-based learning. And that allows for our children to have very hands-on practical experiences that allow for them to, invariably for the first time in our history, to do different things and pull together different concepts. For example, in agriculture, we're linking it to technology and culinary experiences and everything. And one of the things that also has to happen is, it amazes me when we all travel around the world for different things, and you go to a supermarket, and you go into that supermarket and you see premium price for organically grown vegetables. And what the rest of the world calls organic is invariably how we simply grow vegetables in Barbados. But we've never been taught as a people to, again, pride of place in what we have, what we've been able to do, and to realize that should I export what we already have and simply, plus a few other things, sanitary and phytosanitary conditions, but to put those things out there and to get our people to understand that there's value in how Bajans do things in agriculture, and to say to the world, this is what we have. So once we get that shift in mindset about the sector itself, all of these other areas in terms of technological components, culinary, I believe will help to unleash the new movement of our development through the lens of the sector, and certainly your ministry has a major role to play. And I want to commit on behalf of my team to working with you in helping to pursue that national imperative.
Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, I want to introduce a very transparent element into your vision of education transformation. And this is a strand in our philosophy or ideology that is fundamental to the whole concept which underpins the direction or the trajectory of the Ministry of Education. The imbalance of Pan-Africanism. And I would like to believe that almost everyone in here is cognizant of what it is and why the government and Prime Minister found it necessary to have a ministry that deals with this phenomenon that ought to be recognized in our educational system. And in my view, there can be no transformation unless this element plays a central role. It's a major imbalance in our history, and any effort to be very clear on who we are. I would hope that we will have some in-depth conversations very shortly, and that your ministry will do all that it can to address this major imbalance. So I just want to suggest to all who are fully aware that this minister is asking, I'm not demanding, I'm asking that in any effort to transform our education system, just like Stanley way back in 1833, found it necessary to address the issue of education and put in what he saw in the British Parliament as necessary for the changes of the hour. And at that time we were talking about sugarcane and things like that. So I am hoping that out of this initiative today, that you will entertain my ministry very shortly. And I hope that you can give me some date with a level of precision.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, Minister. Let me say at the onset, and you'll be very happy to note a number of things. I was taking copious notes as you spoke. One, there's a technical working group which focuses on the transformation and reform of the curriculum itself. And you'd be happy to note that one of the members of that working group is none other than, of course, Ambassador Commission, so as to help to shape that But in addition, from a ministry to ministry point of view, you're absolutely correct. Notwithstanding my own views on it, and we share a like mind. But we have to ensure that 401 years, of course, after the British would have come to Barbados, and we all know, of course, what would have happened thereafter. But this year, as I said, 60 years of independence, given that also 400-year history, 5 years as a republic, how do we now ensure that we can give our students that confidence knowing who they are, unrepentant about it, but at the same time, carrying it with dignity and pride to be able to do many things. Why do I say this? If we are to create a new wave of wealth creation in our country, not just in the traditional modes of having a job and preparing our students to have jobs, but to also be solutions-oriented and to export our ideas across the region, across the world. Up to this point, we've done it in pockets. But my belief, without the science of it and the data to back it up, but my belief tells me that if we were to be able to get our students to be anchored in that confidence of who we are as a people through African studies and who we are as a people, the resilience that we've gone through, which, as I said, if there's one word that is a cross-cutting theme in today's discussion, is that word of resilience. And to help them to understand that notwithstanding the challenges that we've had to go through, we have been able to do A, B, C, D, and done them well. And therefore, again, partnership in education. I welcome the opportunity to work with you and your ministry. And let us commit to setting a date, not just soon, but sometime next week or wherever possible on your calendar, so that we can now, particularly given the exercise that we're having now, put this in a way that will bring benefit and pride to our country, bearing in mind that we have to help our people to understand who they are. As I said earlier, when the Honourable Member for St. Andrew would have asked a few questions, when I was going to school, I knew more about kings in Europe and other parts of the world than the fact that Barbados would have been able to produce 3 presidents in Liberia. That was not told to me, it was not taught. So, are we saying that we shouldn't know about the rest of the world? No. But equally, we must first learn and own and know who we are and have that pride of place woven through the curriculum, how it's taught in our assessments, down to even, for example, sometimes the visuals in the classrooms. The visuals in the classroom, because as I said earlier, we eat with our eyes. So it's not just the curriculum itself, but the environment also, in terms of art and the different things, must also reflect that Barbadianness that allows for us to be able to say, yes, this is that new consciousness through transformation of education. Yeah. So I welcome it.
Thanks very much. The effort to make this or to have a pragmatic application into the education system is not going to be a single effort. It is a universal effort that will spread across ministries. And that's my perception. I'm trying to work assiduously to have all ministers on board, especially in allowing what we do as we go forward to be undergirded by, not saying it has to be exclusive. I'm not trying to be an extremist in any way, but Pan-Africanism must undergird the future as we go forward. Okay, I'm not going to hold on that too long. I also feel, Minister, that I'm seeing expressions of delinquency across a number of specific types of communities across Barbados. And what that mirrors to me is that some of the challenges we are facing is our manifestations of social deprivation, mainly poverty, across the country, that is also causing us to produce that level of delinquency. But central to all of this is our educational system as it impacts on these specific communities. I'm not saying in general, but as it impacts on these communities. What I'm seeing coming out of a number of communities across Barbados, especially in the urban communities and probably across these southern communities on the coastal areas, is we're producing a lot of gunplay, felonies in general. It isn't because man was born evil in these specific communities. There must be an element of what man is doing that is causing specific urban communities and suburban communities to continue to produce characters of this kind. One of my concerns, or what caused me to think about this a lot, is when I look at some of the plants that falls on your ministry, like Belmont Primary School. Belmont Primary School, the principals and the parents and the students are being promised spacious and modern facilities for a considerable time, and is rolling over from one government to the other. The school is devoid of any recreational facilities there. In addition to that, I believe that the data in your ministry would show that school is running extremely low in terms of the comparative performances with other primary schools, especially in my site, St. Michael's area. I don't know comparatively how it goes with the rural communities, but it is very low in comparison with the schools in the other areas. Subsequently, the environment is not doing as well as I believe that it can. And a considerable amount to young men and women from in the immediate surrounding areas really go to school there. I'm just telling you all the variables, but you being the specialist in this area and really expecting from the Ministry of Education a more profound and laser-like focus on what it is about that school that we are not seeing the kind of results that we would like to see. Right? And it is not and I'm saying that because a few years ago, not last year or year before, a few years ago, I had access to those results, especially at the level of 11 plus. And that school was very second to the bottom and things of that nature. So I'm asking that an effort be made by the Ministry of Education to try to see if we can address some of the variables that might be deriving from that level of negligence that exists in the ministry in relation to the students at that school, the facilities at that school, and I don't know if the money being spent on the school is in any way proportionate to the money being spent on other primary schools across Barbados.
Yep, thank you, Honourable Member. The first point I want to treat to is respect to the sociological side of what you mentioned. The number of our schools, of course, where you see a higher incidence of negative behavior, and there are a lot of underlying issues causing these things across the country. And as part of the restructured ministry, one of the things that we're now about to roll out in earnest is to include in the ministry a sociologist which will focus on, as we plan our education, the curriculum, the infrastructure, the types of things we even talk about within the green spaces, which also affect the psyche of how students learn. So that you're not just pursuing the learning, but the sociologists will help us in the planning of education rollout to be able to touch in and tap into a lot of the underlying issues of the history, of the different demographics, of course, urban and rural, and all of the landscape from a social point of view that will inform and influence how education is rolled out, but more importantly, how it affects these different types of communities. And that's the first thing. I'm going to invite our senior psychologist, Ms. Bradford Warden, to speak to some of the interventions that we're already undergoing to treat to some of the issues that you've mentioned. And then with respect to, for example, not just Belmont Primary, but broadly, some of our schools that need, of course, improved performance and what we're doing, I will invite our Deputy Education Officer to treat to it. Ms. Beckles. So first, our senior psychologist, and then our deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Juanita Bradford Wharton, senior psychologist. We have, as I said earlier, expanded the support services available to our schools. So every school has access to a school social worker who does extensive work in terms of the socio-emotional needs of our students. Our social workers visit schools on a weekly basis where students are referred who are having challenges, and they work in conjunction with the school and the home to put structures in place to help alleviate some of the challenges our students have. They advocate for families and children to get assistance from various community agencies, whether it be the welfare department, whether it be in terms of mental health supports through our partners in the Ministry of Health, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Support Clinic. They work closely with the Child Care Board, with those students who need assistance with child protective services. And they also advocate, having done their needs assessments, for students who may need psychological assessment to determine what the challenges are that cause them not to perform at the level that is expected given their age cohort. The social workers, previously for many years, we had 2 social workers working in the entire system. And in 2021, we were given the post of 7 additional social workers, all working with the primary schools. And so that has enhanced the capacity to connect resources between the home and the school to meet the needs of the students who are at risk. They work very closely with the primary school counselors, and in the last year, we were able to double the support of that particular program. The program is facilitated through the kind assistance of the Sandy Lane Charitable Trust, and they would have provided us with counselors from 2010, but last year we were able to, through our professional services, we were able to double the number of primary school counselors, so that every school now also has a primary school counselor in addition to the social worker. And the counselors would work with students again who are having various issues, things like motivation that may affect their school performance, if there is something going on in the household that may cause the children to need coping skills to help them manage what is going on at home, as well as benefit from what is being offered at school through the curriculum. Our primary school counselors, who in conjunction with the social workers, work on those kinds of challenges that could cause a child not to function and not to benefit from education to the best of their ability. I said earlier that we had increased the psychologists. So between 2008 and 2025, there was one psychologist working to assess students who presented with academic or behavioral challenges. That was yours truly. Last year, we added another 3 psychologists to the contingent in student services. 5 posts were created. 3 persons have filled. 3 out of those 5 posts have been filled, and we are hoping that we can fill the other 2 in short order. But it has significantly increased our capacity to test, to diagnose, and to make recommendations for things that can be done at the home level as well as at the school level. And working in conjunction with the social workers assist parents in holding their hands to help them put the things in place that need to be put in place at the home level. And they also work with the teachers so that they can put whatever social, emotional measures need to be put in place at the classroom level to help those children so that they can benefit from education.
Julia Beckles, Deputy Chief Education Officer. Thank you. Thank you for your question. I'm advised that the Belmont School, just because it was mentioned, has actually performed above our national mean in both English and maths. That does not mean, pardon the pun, that improvements aren't welcome. So it is not in a dire situation, but of course, there's always room for improvement. I'm happy to report to you and the whole of Barbados that your assessment of Belmont was ours when we toured the school sometime last year. We did speak to our ETMU, our Education Technical Management Unit, and I can say that while not everything has been done, that Belmont did receive some attention, some much needed attention. Your concern about what is happening, what you're seeing across Barbados, is one that is shared by the Ministry of Education Transformation. And that has caused us to roll out our values program. Simply put, we understand that our children need to behave better, that there needs to be improvements in the way our children behave. And we have rolled out a program in all of our schools. It used to be called SPBMP, Schools Positive Behavior Management Program. We're now calling it VIBES because we wanted to underscore the whole idea of inculcating values into the lives of our children. We recognize that it can't only be STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. Our children need to have good manners and they need to behave. And therefore, we have asked schools to come together and identify some core values: integrity, kindness, honesty. Come together, respect for each other. And we want those core values to infuse everything that is done within the school. They must be spoken of in every class. They must be spoken of in every operation within the school. They must be visible. We've asked and we have assisted in ensuring that signage is erected with these core values. I can report to you that 75% of our schools, in 75% of our schools, that signage is up, and in just over 60% of our secondary schools. And this was rolled out in September 2025. VIBE stands for Values-Driven Inclusive Behavioral Excellence. empowering learning environments. And as I said, and I wish to underscore that whatever we do, regardless of how many accolades, regardless of how many grades 1s and 2s and certificates our children are able to obtain, wherever they go, they need to have good manners, they need to behave. And I want to assure the country that the Ministry of Education Transformation is underscoring this, is supporting it, is expecting it in all of our schools. But we are not leaving them to do this on their own. We are actually going to assist them, because it is one thing to say to them, be recognized to behave well. If it were so easy, maybe they would have done it. But more importantly, we recognize that that village is shrinking, and that our role as part of the village that helps to prepare our students has increased because of what is not happening in other places within our country. And therefore, we have partnered with this in mind. We recognize that we need to help our children to be able to regulate their emotions, to understand the whole business of emotions and be able to regulate their emotions so that they can make better choices. And what we've done is to partner with the Caribbean Institute for Social and Emotional Learning in this endeavor. Last term, we rolled out this program in 5 of our schools, 3 secondary and 2 primary schools. And the reason why we started so small is because we want to get it right. We're speaking of behavioral excellence, we're speaking of emotional learning, social and emotional learning. It's new for, many children. It's new for many parents because the parents are also being engaged in this initiative. And we are hoping to do it, get it right, work out the kinks so that we can then escalate, expand across all the schools in Barbados. So just to underscore that social and emotional learning, we as a Ministry of Education, we are being intentional in teaching our children how to manage their emotions, and the impact of this is that they will make better choices. And therefore, some of what you've spoken about, Minister, we expect to see some changes in those maladaptive behaviors. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, I appreciate and I know the strong commitment of your officers and this specific officer more so than others. But I respect the logic of redemption. But I also know that there's a decline in the students at the school itself, and I happen to be a parliamentary representative of the area, and I've been fortunate to be there for 6 terms. And I know what the numbers were, and I know what is being requested of me. I don't know if there's a decline in birth rates that can be responsible, but I know that there's most people from within the immediate communities would come to me on a regular basis and ask, can you get my child into Charles F. Bruce? Can you get my child into St. Giles School? And I have to engage in a long conversation with them because I don't want to go any further on that subject matter. But so there are other sociological factors that has to be examined. And I hear a lot about the work of the social worker, but I believe that the psychologists and the sociologists should play a greater role in schools within those communities. and there might be a need for us to see the importance of this specialty of child psychology or child psychologists in some of those schools where we are experiencing these mental challenges, right? And I'm trying to find the best language that is suitable to describe it. So I was just bringing up those factors, those facts, and my interpretation of the facts, so that at least we can do a lot better, not only at that school, but in general across the primary schools and the secondary schools in Barbados.
Yes. Thank you for your contribution, Minister Prescott. And it was interesting when you spoke about the fact that there are some parents who would wish to get their children in certain schools and not other schools. And the goal of the education transformation agenda is to make every school in Barbados a good school. And that's why we've been investing in teacher training and leadership training and dealing with maladaptive behaviors and dealing with the infrastructure. For example, Belmont, you spoke about Belmont Primary, and that school had significant work done to its infrastructure just last year. And I'm pleased to report, even in terms of their performance, the students in the BSSCE went from scoring 64 in English in terms of the mean to 74 last year. And then in math, from 56 in the mean to 66 just last year. And I will say that this is not one factor alone that caused this. It is the environment. We have teachers there who are dedicated. We have principals who are working with the teachers on school improvement plans to bring out the very best. So it just shows to a degree, I mean, we're not perfect in terms of the children scoring 90s, but it just shows that when we intentionally put effort in certain areas, in several areas, multifaceted areas, these efforts conduce to creating the kind of results that are needed. And I will speak to this as well, something called the External Quality Assurance Framework. And as I spoke with you, as I said, we are focusing on making every school a good school. We're looking at making every teacher a good teacher and making every leader a good leader, so that parents will not be in a quandary thinking, well, you know, if my child goes to school A, he will get a better experience than if he goes to school B. And I must say that the change is happening. It's incremental, but it is happening. And we just want the support of our partners in education to make this a reality. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. I just want to be a partner with you and to try to reach the high levels that we set about to reach. But those issues to your attention. All right? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Minister, always a pleasure to see you and certainly other members of your team. A very familiar team to me as former Minister of Education. And I therefore know that this team, I've seen a few new faces, but I know that this team is led ably by Chief Education Officer and PS, and I'm sure all of the other technical officers who have been doing a lot of the groundwork over the last couple of years to be able to bring us to a point of transformation. I think sometimes we tend to forget that in the last 7 years, we have done extremely well in being able to reduce the number of challenges across the educational system, and in particular as it relates to the maintenance of the school plans. I recall back in 2018 presiding over a ministry that I felt like every day there was a challenge with the beehive, there was issue with coach, there were challenges with bees, and it became very difficult really to get to the point of dealing with the issues of transformation because you simply were just troubleshooting the issues of maintenance daily. Fortunately, I think we placed a significant funds in the first couple of years in being able to address a number of the inequalities across the maintenance program of education, to be able to build out a number of the schools, to repair a number of the bathrooms, because I think there was a feeling generally that especially children from vulnerable communities needed to be able to come to school in spaces where there was an adequacy of bathroom facilities, but equally that children needed to want to come to school and want to spend a lot of their time there. Equally, our teachers needed to feel as though they were in a space where they also wanted to teach, and that the resources as well as the school plant was not plagued with a number of environmental issues. So while I think we have much to champion, and sometimes we forget in the midst of all of the outbreaks of issues, I want to, I think, start by just reminding that while we have been upgrading the school plans, and I can see in these estimates that we're going to continue to do so in this financial year, that the ministry clearly has also been building out some new heads and in turn some new school facilities within the school plant infrastructure. So when I look at the estimates, I recall that prior to 2018, the Alma Paris School had been closed. We see now within this budget for this financial year, having reopened the school, you've got 3.7 million being spent in terms of that facility. And for those who may forget, that was a facility that was directed at a number of our children who did not necessarily perform academically well, who had fallen below par in the standardized examinations, but whom we felt needed the opportunity to have a different curriculum to be able to cater to their specific needs. We've also seen a new head appear, the Oceanana Educational Innovation Hub, 6.1 million being invested into that particular facility, which again addresses the issues of climate change. And I believe, as one of the officers spoke to earlier, the areas within which we are able now to marry the climate agenda with being able to teach this new generation about the importance of climate change and the role that they must play in sustainability. We also have it's in the estimates as Charleston, but I believe the correction will be made to more appropriately call it the Climate Change School, if that's correct. And the amount being allocated for this financial year is 2.6 million. So I think collectively, when we look at it, it is clear that while we have been improving the plant facilities and we still have a long way to go, there has been a conscious effort to be able to build out new experiences for our children across the educational system. Now, New Horizon Academy has been one which has been on the cards for a little while. While it's not new, I think for the students who've benefited from that particular program, that also caters to children who, in a sense, have fallen through the cracks, have had some challenges within the mainstream system. And we've been able to pull them out and certainly be able to invest in a curriculum to be able to facilitate those particular kids. But what, from these estimates, I think the public needs to hear perhaps is the expenditure that is being placed in relation to some of the other secondary school plants in particular, first of all. So my question really relates to, while we are building out schools in relation to climate, we're dealing with the issues of adaptation and resilience. We're also dealing with some additional schools in special education, which could never be the amount that we need, but at least it's a start. What else is planned within the secondary school plans that would allow students as they transition and their parents to recognize that the efforts are being made to build out schools in a different way? We speak about education transformation. I think the time should be spent explaining how other schools are intended for that transformation. I know that at the Parkinson Memorial Secondary School, we started the process of the transformation there into a creative arts space to allow children, again, who may not be academically inclined alone or who may have both skill sets to be able to also be good at the creative arts, to have an opportunity to tap into those skills. So I would like to hear from you, Minister, and your team. What are some of the other plans that are borne out in these estimates in relation to not just Parkinson, but certainly a number of the other schools where it's not just about repairs alone, but it's actually the new thought process that is taking place in the Ministry of Educational Transformation in relation to the schools?
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister, for your intervention question. With respect to, and you've hit the nail on the head, with respect to Parkinson's School and the ministry's focus on ensuring that that school can tap into, one, its legacy, and two, its current talent with respect to creative arts, and the benefit that that can bring to the students. Because why? We've learned and appreciated the fact that the cultural economy, the orange economy as it's called, places a huge opportunity for students who also, by and large, have had a long history of being able to do these things as well. To be able to now, in a strategic and seamless way, benefit from that culture through a curriculum that caters for such as well. But in addition to the creative arts, and for example at Parkinson, one of the things that you're going to be seeing across the schools, particularly this year, come September through the curriculum reform at the secondary level, is also in the area of metalwork, woodwork, and technical drawing, but at industry level and at scale. What do I mean? For a long time, you do the metalwork and the woodwork in a traditional way, but the tools of trade and what they use to be able to help towards delivering a world-class type of student who can go into the market and to be not just a carpenter, but a carpenter or a person who can handle woodwork in an industrial way. This is now imperative. So what the ministry has already started to do is to work with the BIDC/Export Barbados, where they're now, through us of course, bringing in equipment from abroad that is at industry scale and level that will allow for these students to now be able to now see themselves not just as students who will graduate with a certificate in these areas, but to, just for example, how you would have businesses around the world like an IKEA. If we had, in certainly my time, to be told that there is an opportunity for you to not just understand the sector of carpentry and design, and to be able to now go on and have a large company around the world, which ultimately does all those things. This is what we're trying to help them to achieve as well. So the idea is that the curriculum reform must now take the traditional subjects that we've become accustomed to and to be able to now help in the pursuit, for example, of the reindustrialization that the country is also pursuing as well. So you're preparing them not just for the world of work, but also giving them that business acumen as we're going forward. But I also invite the chief to treat to some of the other things that we're doing in that regard.
Thank you very much, Minister. Graydon Sealy for us is a big one because, as you may be aware, that has a roll of 891 students, and they are basically cramped in a very small facility. They don't have any playing field. Nevertheless, they're trying to make do. As a result, we are seeking to move the school from that location to the Ursuline Convent site. And I must say that the staff and the children are very excited about the move. And all scholars, as is very evident here. They're hitting the desk, right, are very excited about that move. But as we transition from one site to another, we have planned a series of workshops to help the students and teachers transition in terms of teaching, in terms of behavior, in terms of the entire mindset that is required to ensure that the children, when they move, operate, to their highest potential. So Graydon Sealy is one. In the near future, we are also seeking to build out an AI school and a school that focuses on sports. Yes, but that is a phase two part of the education transformation. But we have identified schools for certain areas because certain schools across Barbados have certain specialties, and we want to ensure that all children get the opportunity to showcase their talents and abilities.
Thank you, both Chief and Minister. Because when I look at the estimates, I'm glad you referenced Grade and Sealy, much to the delight of the Honourable Member for the city. And I'm sure in the other place as well, the Senator Sigler. But again, sometimes I think the story of how we are spending has to be told and what we are spending on. Because as I highlighted the schools that have emerged, I think that we need to find a way through Ministry of Education to communicate to the public the specialties of schools. A lot of emphasis is placed on which school you go to, and that is a traditional thing, a lot of things that people have inherited. But I think if there are children who are genuinely interested in a particular area, from all now, they should be able to identify with schools being known for particular specialist areas. And certainly people who are interested in those areas should be able to partner with the respective schools to be able to build out those institutions in the appropriate way. So I think that at some point the ministry ought to take the opportunity to make it more public, the upgrades as well as the repairs, and certainly the intention school by school of what it is intending to build out. Now that relates to the secondary schools. As it relates to the primary school plans, I can see under this head, so Program 277, Primary Education Domestic Program, there is an expense here for meeting the cost of 7 schools in the second phase of the IDB-funded primary education project, which is required by the loan agreement, and for the refurbishment of other older primary schools throughout the island. We are at 24 million in terms of the expenditure under this program. And I note in the summary attached to the estimates, a reference to the Wilkie Cumberbatch Primary School, which certainly when I was minister, there was a concern then that this school was one of at least 3 schools whose school roll was either above 600 or very close to. And a decision had been made that there were repairs that should have been done on the school for a long time, over decades. And those repairs having not been done, I believe the designs were put in place with a view to being able to provide a facility where the students for the first time would have a school hall, but also to be able to increase the capacity of the classroom spaces. So my question therefore is, while this falls under this head, this 24 million. Obviously, all 24 million is not being allocated to the Wilkie Cumberbatch Primary School, but I would like some details from the team as it relates to what is the intention, Minister, because you've spoken about how this will be one of the future school plans. What is that school going to look like when the students who are there, who have been obviously dislocated for the last few weeks, what is it going to look like when you return? But more importantly, what are some of the other schools that have been identified under this IDB project that are going to be upgraded under this particular program?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. I'll invite the PS followed by the head of our ETMU to respond.
Thank you, Minister. You are quite correct, Deputy Prime Minister, in relation to the 24 million. Yes, it goes beyond Wilkie. We're doing a number of schools. For the upcoming financial year, we have earmarked some 35 schools that will undergo extensive works, including roof repairs, ceilings, lighting, upgrading of bathrooms, because you did mention before that we do have to, in terms of upgrading our bathrooms, I've spoken to my team and I've said to them, this is the year of the bathrooms. In that, I believe that when a student or a staff member, one of the key things that you need is a clean and sanitary bathroom that is welcoming to you. The same type of conditions you would want in your own home when you go to school, that is what you want to see. And you are quite correct also in your statement earlier that there are some children that when they go into the school bathroom, and based on where they have come from, yeah? So we want to ensure that our bathrooms have been upgraded. We want to make sure that, and I was mentioned earlier in terms of the lighting, etc., the roofs, because we are doing intensive work. We are no longer doing little patchwork, where when work is completed, then you have to go back in the next couple of months or next couple of weeks to do it, to redo it. our work going forward is intentional, and it no longer spans a summer period, but the entire year. And it's for that reason that you see the level of expenditure that we're seeking this year for our schools, because we have some 82 schools within our our primary, pre-primary special education needs that the ETMU unit has responsibility for. So this money will go a long way in significantly improving our school plans. Because added to that, we need to ensure, and I've used the word earlier, making our schools resilient. Making sure that our schools are compatible for persons with disabilities. That is something that we have to ensure that that is done. That is how some of that money will be spent, making sure that we have ramps, etc., bathrooms that are also compliant for persons with disabilities. So these are a lot of major works that we'll be doing throughout the upcoming financial year, which explains the level of expenditure that we're asking for. But I will allow our director, ETMU, he will be able to go into more detail in terms of all of the schools that we'll be doing, and also by name and the type of works. Thank you.
Thank you. Specific to those schools under the IDB-funded project, or the Skills for the Future project, the 10 schools to benefit are Elliott Belgrave, and these are all primary schools: St. Elizabeth, St. Jules, St. Catherine, St. Martin's Mangrove, St. Philip, Milton Lynch, St. Paul's, Eagle Hall, and Good Shepherd. Those are the ones specific to the Skills for the Future project. There are 12 other major ones that will be done through ETMU. Again, all primary schools, in this case, Ada Costa Edwards, All Saints Primary, Bailey's Primary, Blackman and Gollop, Deacons, Grantley Prescott, Hilda Skeen, Hillby Turners Hall, Roland Edwards, St. George Primary, St. James Primary, St. Stephen's Primary. So those are the major ones out of the 35 that are captured within the program for the coming year.
Thank you, sir. A follow-on question to that, though. As obviously we keep hearing the school rolls are declining, and we are perhaps beginning to start to right-size ratios in terms of teachers and students across the schools, although some teachers may still feel that these school numbers are still too high. But as we redesign the school plant, are there plans to improve the plants to allow for greater spaces for teachers to, for instance, do the individual education plans, to ensure that we have literacy centers within the school plant, to ensure that we have more dedicated spaces for special needs education? Because oftentimes there's a temptation to say, well, close the school, as opposed to looking at the space and being able to build out the space to be able to make that space now a more dedicated space for learning of different resources. Obviously, when I think of the introduction of the robotics program, for instance, we talked a lot in the early stages about building out the schools from nursery right through to tertiary, where we had dedicated programs for robotics clubs and robotic classes. I see the monies also allocated in this year's budget as well for the robotics program. I think I see about $330,000. But are we reimagining the school plans, or is the approach going to be that we are going to see the school plants as the numbers dwindling, and therefore we may have to bring about closures? Because I recall, and I'll just share this experience quickly, St. Luke's Brighton is a school in St. George, where we had done a walkthrough, and I was sharing this with the minister yesterday, and we had looked at the school plant because those numbers had also been declining. Instead of making the case to move the students, what we actually looked at is how could we better resource the existing school plant to allow the teachers to be more comfortable, to allow the students to be more comfortable, and to kind of model it after what we would consider the private school models, where the spaces are really more suitable for more intimate learning within the school environment. So I'm just wondering, as we talk about transformation, are we reimagining the school plant as we know it, Or are we acting to respond to the fact that school numbers are dwindling and therefore we may need to condense the school plans in such a way to be able to have fewer schools?
All right, I'll ask the team to jump in, but let me say to you, DPM, the answer is yes to all. And why is this? As you've rightly said, there is a declining number in terms of our birth rate, which of course is manifesting in the lower roles coming into the school. And therefore, right now, we're at a ratio of really 1 in 10, teacher-student ratio, as it were. But it therefore means that we have to now look across the system of teachers, particularly with respect to their skill set and qualification, and to see how do we match that number to have an effective teacher-student ratio that will allow for us to deliver on education through not just the right number, but as you rightly said, the perfect classroom size, as it were. Now, second of all, what is happening between the pedagogical side under the chief and her team and the revised curriculum and the technical management unit team is that, and Wilkie Canvas is a perfect example, it is not just about refurbishing the school and making it look good, but now every school going forward must now be what the future of education looks like. And it is also something that we have to be very mindful of for a number of reasons, but principally, a lot of our schools were built also at a time when there were space constraints. And every school, as it currently stands, does not have the adequate space. So it comes back to your point of St. Luke's Brighton. I had the fortune of having a tour of that school at an event last year. And remarkable work, of course, was done. But now we must be able to now settle all of these three components that you would have mentioned, so as to be able to match the interests of the student-teacher ratio, 2, pedagogy, and 3, improve infrastructure, all at the same time. And these are continuing modes of change that we have to manage and sit on top of. So you're absolutely correct. And this therefore has the ministry's attention that as we build out, as we refurbish, we're not looking at one lens, but looking at all three and seeing how best, within the constraints of resources, of course, to be able to treat these objectives.
All right, thank you, Minister. And you are absolutely correct, DPM, repurposing rooms at some of these schools. We have to be very mindful that from September 2026, we'll be going in the direction of universal pre-primary access. And when we look at the stats from 2023, we recognize that there are 2,032 children who were born in that year, which means that if every child takes up a space from September 2026, we need to have room for them. Additionally, every day we are getting calls about children who have certain special education needs. And while we are practicing the inclusionary approach, there are some classes, of course, that will need to be in specific rooms with specific types of children so they can get the proper intervention. So we are thinking and planning to repurpose rooms and expand on certain school plans. We are also very cognizant of the fact that there is an increasing number of children who require counseling, and we need to have spaces where our school counselors can sit down and engage with these children. The spaces need to be private. We can no longer squeeze in a little library in a corner or squeeze in somebody's little room in a corner and have a chat with these children. So all of these things we are taking into account, the coding and robotics. We also are looking at ignition labs at certain schools. So while it may seem like a good idea to close the school because it has a small role, we have to be very aware of who we are catering to and the kinds of spaces that are required to make that school more effective. And I'm happy to say that the team at the Ministry of Educational Transformation is working actively on this. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's every child Barbados to bring about the change that we want to see, that we call education transformation.
Just my closing comment. Chair, I totally agree with you. I mean, this is a very difficult conversation to have. You have 30 MPs, everybody will have a perspective as to whether their school in a community should close. There are people who are sensitive because some schools are named after, you know, the monarchy. And these are some difficult conversations we must have, but I think the perspective of numbers is important for the ministry to share. I think the repurposing of the school plants is an important conversation to have, and that's why I started by saying that I think the ministry has to share the vision in terms of how they are reimagining the school plants, so that there is not a knee-jerk reaction when you say this school may need to be downsized or it may need to be closed because the numbers are declining, but rather that people are taken on the journey to really fully appreciate why these decisions are being made in the context of declining numbers, and also the thrust of the ministry towards educational transformation. So again, I will come back, no doubt, yes, tomorrow, but I do believe that we are on the right track in terms of being able to build out plant, while at the same time maintaining and preserving the existing ones and retooling to be able to deal with the new technologies that are ahead of us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Central.
Thank you, Chair. This question is in relation to data, and it's kind of feeding off of the point that Deputy PM would have made in terms of having numbers to show. So this question is for the benefit of the public. With the ministry requesting $289,849,114 for non-statutory expenditure for the upcoming financial year, what measurable literacy and numeracy benchmarks has the ministry established to ensure value for money and demonstrate improvement in foundational learning?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm happy to report to Parliament that the ministry has embarked on an aggressive literacy initiative to help close a number of gaps that have existed. But equally, I'm happier to report that those gaps are beginning to close given the interventions that we've been making over the last number of years, both in terms of teacher training, giving them the necessary tools and skill sets so as to be able to respond to the needs of students, and two, the style and helping those students now in new modes of learning, new modes of literacy, to be able to close those gaps. Now, I'm going to invite Ms. Little, who of course on our side is leading this initiative. But as I said, we've set a very clear ambition, and I would have indicated it last year in the ministerial statement. I would have mentioned it this morning. We are very clear that if we are to really build out an education system, if we are to build out a society that has Bajans who are confident, who are able to read, who are able to navigate information, we will be on the right track. And therefore, what you're seeing in the estimates is really that reflection in one, curing the deficits that have existed, even though, of course, the gaps are closing, there's still work to be done. For example, we set a very clear objective that every child must be able to read by the age of 7. And we have determined that we are definitely on track, but I invite Ms. Little to speak to you and to the country with where we're at and how we're going to move forward in earnest and at scale, so as to ensure that we can treat to the issue of literacy effectively.
Good afternoon, Janelle Little, Education Officer in the Nursery and Primary Section, Ministry of Education Transformation. As the Honourable Minister mentioned, we are currently engaged in what we will call a national intervention, literacy intervention program. We want to make sure that every school in Barbados has the same level of literacy outcomes for our students. So therefore, we have invested heavily in structured literacy resources for every primary school in Barbados. We have scale, so therefore we have resources from nursery right up to class 4. And we also cater to the learning intervention groups at the secondary school level. We also cater to the special education schools and units as well. So we want to ensure that every child in Barbados has access to high quality literacy resources. In addition to that, we know that, as Minister said, we have heavily invested in training our teachers to deliver quality education, but we also recognize that teacher training only goes so far. We have now included 5 teachers who act as literacy coaches, and they go to schools to assist teachers with targeted training. In addition to that, we will be building out that cohort so that we have more literacy coaches coming on board to work with our teachers in a targeted, individualized way. These coaches, will also be working with the students. As you mentioned, we want to make sure that the children who are challenged can also have the individual interventions as well. So these coaches will be working with the teachers, they'll be working with the students as well to make sure that they receive better literacy outcomes. We are also going to ensure that our students are assessed at the end of every term. We are currently on board to engage in assessments at the end of this month, so we have a good gauge as to where our children are currently, and at the end of next term, we will know what gains have been made between now and then as well.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that these students will be continuously assessed, because oftentimes we have programs put in place, but then we don't collect the data to see whether or not these programs are actually working. So I'm happy to hear that, but my follow-up question would be then, will the data that is being collected become available to the public so that the taxpayers can see their money's worth, especially in circumstances where the source of revenue is primarily tax revenue? And more specifically, 94% of it is tax revenue, and there also has been a 34% jump from the last financial year. So the question really is, will this data become available to the public so that taxpayers can see where their money is being spent and if it's effectively working?
Before Ms. Little jumps in to respond to you in the affirmative, let me also indicate, Honourable Member, that there's going to be an aggressive national campaign led by Ms. Little and team so that the country understands where we're going and how do we get there. Because what has to now happen is that the pursuit and road towards literacy has to become similar to that approach of tourism years ago. It is not just for the education ministry, it's not just for the teachers, it's not even just for parents. It is for every entity in Barbados to get on board. So whether you're in the private sector, you're an NGO, you're a faith-based organization, literacy must now be the new movement of development for Barbados. And the ministry is committed to rolling out that media campaign, as it were, in sharing the data, in sharing the success, in sharing the improvements, so that the country understands where we've come from, where we're moving, and where we're going to get to. But equally, I want to use this as an opportunity to also remind us that we mustn't get complacent with respect to the achievements that we will continue to make in literacy. Because as simple as you can succeed, you can also fall short. And therefore, this must be a continued national drive in effort as we go on.
As it relates to the assessments, I will say that we are going to be utilizing an international assessment, the Dibels assessment. And yes, I believe that that information can be made available to the public. As I said, it is an international assessment. So therefore, it will be good to see where our children rank internationally as well.
Thank you. So my final question would just be a logical follow-up from there, which would be then how soon? Because everyone will start to ask then how soon from now will we be able to see that first international assessment being publicized?
All right, so I will jump in here. I'm just going to tap back to the question you asked before in terms of the public being able to see the improvements that are being made. Because we have indeed been working assiduously to close the gap when it comes to reading. And to date, we have reached 6,421 students. We have 587 teachers trained and 82 schools covered. So this represents 97% of the target group. Okay? We've also been seeing an improvement in children's vowel mastery. We've seen a 46% improvement. In terms of consonant mastery, 73.3%. There were students who were unable to sound any vowels. Now that number has reduced by 3.4%. So what has been happening is that with the interventions, with the targeted interventions that we have been giving in literacy, our children have been improving in terms of their ability to read. And we're saying that by December 2026, after this intervention, our students should be able to read at least 2 levels above where they are reading. And how have we done this? Yes, we've spoken about training teachers, but what we did administratively was that we said we are going to set aside 1 period every day for children to read, where teachers will teach children who can't read, and those who can read will strengthen their ability to read. And that's the reason we call it the SOAR period, S-O-A-R, where, not S-O-R-E, S-O-A-R, where S is strengthen, O is or, A, ability, to R, read. So across primary schools in Barbados, every day there is a period for all children to engage in the act of reading. And we'll be very pleased to share with the public the gains that we've been making in that regard.
Thank you, Chief, for really breaking it down in terms of the numbers. But I didn't hear how soon. I still didn't hear that.
So by December 2026, we are seeking to close that gap significantly. So all children by age 7 who have the ability to read should be able to read by age 7 because of the intensive efforts that we are putting into this program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question this round, and I must confess to being a little bit confused. I'm intervening at different times because I thought that we had to ask a single question with related follow-ups, but I realize that that may not necessarily be the case. But I will ask this question nonetheless. With respect to the physical plant, now let me first thank the ministry for the work, the ongoing work at Korejampari. And as far as I know, it is the Korejampari School and not the Korejampari Secondary School. I'm not sure where these additions to Korejampari and Alexandria are coming from. But at the Courage Parish School, there is significant work ongoing. My interaction with those involved tell me that there is very good support coming from the ministry, and I want on their behalf and on the constituents' behalf, because Coach Pari is seen in St. Peter as St. Peter's School. And they are very happy about the work, particularly to the cafeteria area. There is, and I'm still speaking about construction, in the estimates, I think it's subhead 642, and this is with respect to Alma Paris, a significant amount for physical, for capital works. And as I indicate that we are very, very happy about the reopening of the school and the work done so far, I'd just like to get an idea of the work that is planned for this fiscal year that supports the 1-point-something million, I think, that I see in the estimates under that subhead.
Yep, thank you very much, Honourable Member Minister. I'll invite the PS to intervene.
Good evening, Minister, once again. When the Paris School was opened, yes, we did a lot of work to make sure that it was open for the students and the staff that are there. It has a roll of around 30 children. However, there is a building on the site that is not in use, and it is required to be refurbished to allow for the expansion of the programs at that school. Yeah, as you would imagine, I know the chief will be able to go a bit deeper in terms of the curriculum. What the children there are exposed to is not the traditional curriculum. Yeah, so there, the different tech voc areas, etc. Because as we do education transformation, it's meeting the children where they are. And so therefore, in that vein, there is that building there that needs to be developed for I think it's allowed for arts and carpentry, etc. So there's a building that is closed up, but that is to be developed in that way.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, that building is the original St. Peter's Girls' School, by the way. And I'm aware of the good work being done with respect to the existing syllabus. I know the students are very happy, particularly with the hairdressing side, but also very much so with the culinary. And the teachers there who are leading in those areas are excited about interacting with the children. And of course, as a parliamentary representative, I'm also excited about that. This would just be a comment as opposed to a follow-up question. There was a response to a question from the Honourable Member for St. Michael, Christchurch West Central with respect to people with disabilities. And if I am not mistaken, one of the responses suggested to me that once things are in place, we would engage with the stakeholders to make wrong things right. That's what it sounded to me. I'm not sure if I was mistaken, but I just want to say that getting the council engaged at the beginning will help to prevent some of the issues that may arise a little bit later. And so matters relating to access, not just at the Alma Paris Academy, but also at Courage Pari, Alexandra, and all the other secondary schools on the island, and primary schools as well. That whole matter of access for people with disabilities, students with disabilities, needs to be on the front burner, and it needs to be done in the planning stages. And so I encourage the technical management unit, through, obviously, Chair speaking through the Minister, to ensure that the Barbados Council for the Disabled is involved in the planning or involved at the planning stage, so that we make sure that the commitment we've made to people with disabilities is not a paper commitment, but that it is a lived reality, not engaging them afterward, but recognizing that they need to be involved from the get-go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I also want to reassure you and other Honourable Members and the country by extension that that's That's definitely something that I support. And once again, it comes back to the same focus of partnering in education. Because of course, if we're going to not just build out the facility, but make it fit for purpose for different audiences, and in this case, of course, inclusion, we must ensure that those who are directly affected, as it were, must be involved at the onset in the shaping and also the testing of what we are rolling out as well. So I completely support and endorse your suggestion and give you that assurance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to speak again.
Second that.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the adjournment of the suspension of the House until tomorrow, the 3rd of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable House be suspended until tomorrow 10 a.m. in the forenoon. The Leader of Government Business has humbly asked me to, I don't want to use the term warn, but to coerce and or to cajole honorary members that 10 o'clock is 10 o'clock. That 10 o'clock is not 10:30. And I do believe, in all honesty, that I understand that there may be problems with transportation and there's congestion on the roads. But I believe that if we know that we have to get here for 10, that we can make all effort to get here for 10. The same way that I get here for 9:30, you all can get here for 10 o'clock. A word to the wise is more than enough.